Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to Coach's Corner. Bam is back after his long hiatus, so happy to have him back. We had some guests fill in, but yeah, I'm super excited to get into this episode. We today are going to talk about character crises, and a bunch of subtopics are going to come along with that: solo viability, maining multiple characters, or having counter picks. Right? We've seen both sides of the coin work for a bunch of different players, but I think the biggest question is how do you decide if you're a solo main, if you're a counter picker, what character is worth committing to, and there's even the question of just like time management in general, right? Some people need the working man character, right? Sometimes you just gotta like pick up Wolf or Roy and hit those buttons and get to work, and it's just like, all right, my fundies versus yours, let's get it, right? And then obviously there's the technical characters that do take a little bit more of a time commitment and stuff like that, like maybe Sheik and or like Steve if you want to get like super technical. I think Steve can be played in a very basic way, but that's a whole nother topic. But yeah, so I guess around the horn, how do you guys feel about character crises in general? I know I've been talked to a lot when I've done my coaching sessions. That's probably one of the most common questions I get in terms of just like, I'm in a character crisis. What character should I play? These are the list of characters I play. Yada yada yada. Right?
Yeah. There's a lot of people that just get like they get really stuck up on this, and honestly it's something that's unfortunate because at times this can be a cause for a lot of people, like their growth being curtailed, right? Because they're just so transfixed on finding a character and they're going back and forth rather than just sticking with something and moving forward and kind of then kind of I think sometimes you can't answer that question for yourself until you have more growth as a player, and then you get to a point where you kind of really understand where like what is good for you, what you're good at, what you're not so good at, and then you can try to judge accordingly. But man, I've seen it definitely be the bane for a lot of like mid to high level players, and they just like can't get to where they need to be because they're just playing a billion characters under the sun, man.
Yeah, for sure. I think to me, the thing that people kind of struggle with is that they don't know like what is the deciding factor, right? Like why should I pick up a character? They just kind of like pick a character. Is it's cool? I'll do it. Or like, like, oh, Leo's winning with Byleth, I'll play Byleth. But I think like going into your character selection, kind of like the first step is that like you got to figure out what do you want to get out of your character. Like it like how much do you value fun? How much do you value winning? And of course, like what do you think is like what do you think is a winning character, right? Because like what is viable to Leo is different than what is viable to Tweek, and this is different than what's viable to Bailey Bob for 20 who goes 0-2 at his locals, right? Um so I think that's like a big part, and it in terms of like what I personally recommend, what I always tell my students is like you got to find a character with weaknesses that you enjoy playing, because I feel like that's kind of where a lot of the character picks go wrong for people, is that they get to a point where they're like good with the character, they feel like they push the character, there's not too much to get out of them anymore, or you run into matchups and it's like, okay, well, now I'm in a bad matchup, now that character is going to abuse my character's weaknesses. Is that like a dynamic that I enjoy playing? And that's different for a lot of characters, right? So like something like Aegis, while the character has very few weaknesses in like neutral, has a really well subpar offstage game. Is that a weakness that you can live with having? And if not, then you should think about something like a Zero Suit or a Joker or a Pikachu or a Steve with a better disadvantage. And they're going to have their own like weaknesses, but if you don't like surrender to a certain dynamic that is going to be well disadvantageous for you, um if you don't surrender, if you cannot surrender to that, then you're not going to be able to find a character. So that's what I always recommend, is like find a character that has weaknesses that you find like enjoyable or challenging or interesting to play around. That is my take.
And I think it's worth noting that you need to evaluate what your metagame is like, what the people you are playing against are good against, bad against. I have frequently run into, especially for someone whose goal is, let's say, to be power ranked in the region, a lot of the competition that they're facing, for example, can't actually edge guard me through a side B. And so, even though that's normally a weakness for the character, if you understand that that weakness isn't something that your region is skilled enough to cover, go for it. That's part of the reason why certain punished characters, especially, overperform at lower levels of play. If a character is pretty easy bake on their punish game, so let's say you're Donkey Kong, even though most players agree that that character is not very good, if you do play Donkey Kong, it's probably going to perform about as well as the top tier would for you in the early parts of the game, just because the character is going to punish other people's weaknesses more than they're able to cover your weaknesses for what would normally be for Donkey Kong. So things like that, you need to take into consideration that, like Ramsey said, what works for Leo does not work for you. Just because MK Leo can win with Byleth does not mean you are going to start curb stomping your locals when you switch from R.O.B to Byleth. That's not how that works. So, as Bam said, different players have different strengths. You need to ask yourself, where am I trying to go with this character? I think that a lot of players are expecting quick improvements when they switch to a character that tests entirely different skill sets than what they have. And some players miss character is just being a line of difficulty. Oh, if I play this character that's challenging, I'm going to get better. This is where you see like a lot of lower level Ganon players, for example. Or that's one of the things I hear the most is, oh, I'm playing Ganon because that way I'm going to learn Smash. No, sir. That's Ganon doesn't test Smash fundamentals. That's not a Smash character. He tests how well you can find openings in your opponent, which is a fundamental. But like a lot of the things that you have as Ganon aren't things you can just take and then just pick up another character and just translate that as, oh, well, now I'm playing Mithra, who's 10 times better, so I'm going to have 10 times better results. You're not going to have that. So I think that's a set of misconceptions people tend to have. Playing less than the best character does not mean that you are going to be a better player in a year. So I specifically had someone recently where they gave me their goal, and I believe their goal was they specifically didn't just want to be ranked in the region. They wanted to be ranked in the top 5 of one of the strongest regions in the US. And so I said, okay, well, you can still do that with pretty much any character, but you need to acknowledge that where you're at is very pliable, because I didn't want to say this directly, but essentially, if you are bad at the game, it doesn't matter what your skill set is. You can pick up a new skill set and it's not going to be much worse than what you already have. If you are honest with yourself and you recognize, I'm a bad player, I can play any character in the game because I'm going to suck at any character in the game, and then I can improve. I will improve if I put in this time to practice. If I learn this character, I will improve. That is how it is for everyone on this planet. You are not an exception. If you are bad at the game, pick a top tier, because you know that it will always be your fault. That's the whole point. You need to take accountability for yourself, even if it isn't your fault. It doesn't matter whether it's your fault. It matters whether or not you continue looking for solutions. Because if you believe that there are no solutions, that something is set in stone, then you're not going to change that. And so you'll find yourself in positions where you could have found a solution, but you didn't look for it because you thought it was just a shortcoming of your character. There's a reason why we see players like Leo who are able to take characters that are otherwise less than impressive, like Byleth as an example, but also he still regularly recovers with Mithra as an example against top players too. And the thing is that he recognizes there might be solutions possible, and then he tells himself, I'm going to find those solutions. He doesn't say, this is just a fundamental weakness of the character. Now, he still gets frustrated when things like Proto happen. That's part of the reason why he dislikes Mithra as much as he does, because the character can cover his specific solutions. But if you look at what his tournament strategy was, it wasn't to start playing characters with better recoveries. It was to try and problem solve, to fix the issues and see if he just can't find a solution. And I expect that if he eventually does run out of those, that he will eventually start looking for different solutions. But he's always going to investigate first. He's always going to assume that there is a possibility that he hasn't noticed yet. And then when he still can't find it after putting in the time, after putting in the effort, and I assure you he puts in a lot of effort, then that's when he'll reach that point.
Yeah. And I think one thing to always just keep into account as well is this is something I always try to mention to players. There is a top tier for almost every single playstyle, in my opinion. for this game. This game's very, very generous in terms of just like viable characters. To be on your local PR, you can do it with any character in the game. I can confidently say that if you're a good enough player. Obviously, when we get to global rankings, it gets a little bit different. But let's just say in previous Smash games, getting on your local PR with a mid or bottom tier was way harder, and way less unrealistic because you're fighting like
Yeah.
god characters like ice climbers and Meta Knight and stuff like that, right? So for Brawl, and then even Smash 4 was a little bit more balanced, right? Uh, but the top tiers were very clear cut. Like a Lucas getting in the top 32 at SmashCon is insane, but at the same time, it's Ultimate, so it's like it is crazy. But that is something that happens in Ultimate quite often, where it's like, oh, this obscure character got in top 32. Smash 4, keep dreaming.
No
not
way.
gonna not gonna
Yeah.
happen. Not gonna happen unless you were like, you know what I mean? Like there were like some sleeper picks, but it was way more rare in Smash 4 than it is in Ultimate, right?
Yeah, didn't Sumo Suto get into like winners finals against Aquila with Dr. Mario? That's
Just
just this
recently,
yeah.
weekend, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just this weekend.
Yeah.
So like, if he can do it with Doc, then like you can do it with anyone, honestly. Especially in Japan, right? Region is stacked, and he's just going ham
Very
with
strong
Doc.
region.
He
Yep.
beat Kome. He not at the event, I don't think, but he beat Kome twice in
Yeah.
Shulk, Dr. Mario. So yeah, I think in
That's
that
crazy.
sense, yeah, that is insane. That's absolutely insane. So in that sense, yeah, like a lot more viability in this game. But I also feel like, um, and I would like to hear what you guys have to think about this. I think that this game is not as well balanced as people say. And I think that's what a lot of people kind of like struggle with in terms of their character pick, is that they feel like, okay, well, there's so many characters you can pick. A lot of them feel viable because they have some sort of like, good risk reward. But then the more in depth you get, the worse your character gets. And then you realize that, at least in my experience, a lot of the balance in Smash Ultimate is because people just don't have the time to really figure out every matchup. And then you get to the point where, well, maybe you can make your character function initially, but then as your region gets better, it gets figured out more, and then you're kind of like back to struggling, which is to name something like Yoda Cage. Just kind of like came out of nowhere, did really well with Bowser Jr. And then after a few showings, people were like, "Fuck, now I need to prepare for Bowser Jr." And ever since, his results still solid, but not on that level anymore. And I feel like we've seen that happen with Sheik as well, right? We had a boom where Sheik was just like, Sheik is the next top tier, amazing character. Did well for like 3 or 4 tournaments. People started prepping for Sheik, and now where Sheik, she's back to being what she was, which is like like a solid high tier, with very few representation in top cuts. So I feel like a lot of the viability in this game is also related to, or is also like in direct relation to, the lack of experience that you can have in terms of matchups. So on the long run, I think this game doesn't have as many viable characters, but then at the same time, we see Dr. Mario getting second at a Japanese major. So maybe I'm entirely wrong. What do you guys think?
I
I
agree
mean,
with that. Like in the long run, it
mhm.
Yeah.
like this game on paper is in balance. Like like I know it's hard to like just have any podcast without saying this name, but Steve, like I look at Steve and I'm just like, how do you lose with this character? Like look at all these tools. Like on paper, by the way, I'm not like trying to flame anyone, but on paper, when you look at Steve and you're like, okay, technically, if you're perfect, you 0 to death everyone or whatever, right? Or like if they have perfect SDI, you 0 to 90 them or whatever, right? Like on paper, this game is not balanced whatsoever. On paper, Dr. Mario shouldn't be getting third at a big tournament, right? But I do think it's like pretty crazy too because we're what, year 3 or year 4 into this game. We're like pretty deep into this game, and I just think the game's really hard in multiple ways. Like I think Sheik on paper is extremely good character, but like a human piloting that throughout a 3-day marathon tournament and not fucking up all 3 days, very hard to do. Very like hard in a sense where we're just humans and we're just like playing, right? We're not like robots or anything like that. It's very hard to like just not fuck up. And then on top of that, there's like a bajillion matchups. So much people get matchup checked, right? Like Lucas getting into top 32 of SmashCon, was everyone ready for Lucas on that warpath, right? Like probably not. And I'm not trying to take
Yeah.
away from Regalo's performance at top 32. Regalo played amazing, nonetheless, right? But when you that is the pro of playing a sleeper pick character. When you're playing a character, and I won't even say tiers. When you're playing a character that's not as popular, right? That is the advantage you get.
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. I mean, that's just how it goes, right? It's always once you can get it down to like an information war, then you're usually in a good spot, and like that's where a lot of the
I'll be right
balancing is
back.
going to come from, right? At the end of the day, it's always going to be a situation, to Ramsey's point, right, where it's like if we get granular with it, if we get down to the end game of the meta, like yeah, there's a lot of these characters where we just realize these things that maybe seemed like cohesive strategies, so then we learn like okay, this was just like a knowledge check here, right? It just takes time, right? The effort needed to be put in at that time for me to reliably understand the nuances of the character is just not going to be there yet. So I think over time, it's always going to go to more imbalance, right? I think there's no way that's going to kind of stand the test of time once people are really getting extremely granular with it. But I think also too, though, right now is I still feel that there's not enough people getting to that level and to that point. And I think that there's people preemptively just inferring like, oh, this character can't do this. This is impossible here. And so because of that, I'm going to switch, right? And it goes back to what our initial conversation was about as a person. Like a lot of times people look for external factors to justify their internal inefficiencies, right? And that's just a very real thing of humanity. It's very easy to be like, I'm going to blame that guy across the street. It's his fault as to why I am not getting my dub. It is all his fault. I'm the GOAT. He's trash. He did it, not me. I should be winning everything. Why is that not happening? Well, this scumbag over here, like it's all his fault, right? And a lot of times people, one of the beautiful things to me when it comes to fighting games is that is self-discovery, right? And you're using these characters as a lens to understanding also your own like inefficiencies, right? And like the places where you need to learn and you need to grow. And sometimes people just get caught in these character crises because they cannot come to the point where they can accept this is something that is independent of these characters right now. When we get to the top end game, way down, perfect play, yes, we're going to see some things here, and now we need to assess that. But a lot of those times, for most people that are going to be watching this, and most people out there in the world playing this game, more likely than not, it is let's say a skill issue. It is a you issue versus the actual character. And being able to recognize that is part of how you can grow as a person and really break that down and burst through into that next level. And I think that's extremely important for anyone who's like, listening or watching this podcast and just seeing like, how am I going to do this character? Like I have, for example, right? I have one friend of mine, really, really, I love the guy, really great guy. Every single game, this guy has a character crisis. Every single game. While going to Discord, we're in the in voice chat, and he's always talking about like, oh, well, I play this character, but I don't know, but I want a character who can do this. I can want a character who do this. And every time I just hear it, I'm like, man, you want a character that does everything, right? He's like, oh, well, no, not really, but then, and I'm just like,
that's what I want.
I think Smash 4. Or
yeah, it's like I just want to. I'm like, it sounds like you just don't want to hold your controller. That's what it sounds like, right? And so,
Amen,
and it's
brother.
not any disrespect to him, but like, the fact of the matter is, like, you have to understand that you yourself are a very vital part of that equation as to why you are losing. Yes, there's going to be certain aspects that have to deal with a character, right? The better character you have, more likely then you're probably going to be in a better position there where you can win. But then even that gets a little nuance as well, because sometimes the best character may not be necessarily the best character for you based on how you are and certain skill sets that you have that you probably unaware have been building up, not only in game playing similar games, but also even outside of games, right? Certain skill sets that you lean to, like there's so much there to be dissect, right? But I think a lot of times the best thing in anything, whether it's in the game or it's in life, is to first look at what you can control and what you can do, and then from there you get yourself to a competent point. Then you can start looking at, okay, maybe there's some character now. Now with this new perspective that I have, this new vision, this new wisdom that I have, let me see and let me be open, let me be honest with my issues and my shortcomings. and what game I want to play and what I'm all right with dealing with, right? And what obstacle am I willing to overcome? Because there's going to be an obstacle. It's not going to be free. Like that's in the day. Some are going to be easier than others, right? Like Dr. Mario's obstacle is probably harder than like Aegis or something like that. But that being said, there's an obstacle nonetheless, and then you have to accept that before you move forward and really can kind of get out of a character crisis, in my opinion.
I know what I was getting at is that like I feel like that's harder to do in Ultimate than in like other Smash games though, because in like if you pick a character in Smash 4, you know what you're in for. Whereas with Ultimate, there's so much like layers of knowledge that
Yes.
that are kind of required before you make like an accurate judgment. It is hard to get to the point where you can accurately say like, okay, these are like this is what I signed up for. And these are the parts that I feel like are kind of like, like my character's challenges, and these are the parts where it's more like a personal challenge. Of course, at the end of the day, it's all like on you to improve, right? But um I feel like in this game, like so often you see people with character crises, um, because I don't know, they pick heck if I know, they pick Lucas, and then they figure out, well, I mean, I went into Lucas thinking he was like a sleeper top tier, but after playing Lucas for a year, I figured out that well, actually, he's not what I thought he was after all. And that's kind of what Charles and you as well, Bat, kind of like said is that in a lot of these situations, um, that bridge is just very hard to well, it takes a long time to build, and then once
A
you're
long time.
there you still have to decide if you want to cross it. Whereas again, in a move like, or in a game like Smash 4, it's like, okay, well, I want the best character, I'll pick Bayo. I want like a viable character that's maybe a little bit more fun. I pick Zirsu, Ryu, Korin, Marth. And then there's
Yeah.
like the mid and low tiers that all kind of like suck ass in the meta. Whereas in this game it's like, oh, I'll pick a mid tier, I'll pick Piranha Plant, and then beat Takara. Shout outs to the French Piranha Plant that beat Takara. And then you're like, okay, well, maybe this character is good. And then the next round you play your training partner from your local and you lose to them, which actually happened. And you and you almost drown in pools. So it's hard. It's really hard in this game.
What's happening to me?
Dude,
Mr. Crab
video
memes,
is-
dude. I just beat the camera. I thought I was good.
Dude.
This video is turning into the PG stats part that we all missed out on. This is the French Ultimate Wanted review. Twitter, pay attention.
Oh yeah, congrats on 13th. Congrats on 13th top player Ramses.
Top player Ramses.
Top player Ramses, dude.
My favorite top player.
Let's go. 13. That
Shout
is
outs.
not easy to
Oh,
do
no.
right there. Good shit.
Yeah, thanks. Dude, shout outs to my coach, Tony.
Hey, let's
There
go.
you go.
Tony gave me some advice on SkyJ. And then shout outs to my other coach, El Tigre. Also
Oh.
known as S1, the NES player. I don't know if you guys remember S1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Vaguely, yeah.
He retired and he's now an Incineroar main, and he actually reviewed SkyJ's VODs. I gave me advice and it worked. It was very useful. So yeah,
Legend.
you shout outs. That's so fucking funny. El Tigre, bro.
El Tigre. What a legend. Oh my gosh.
But yeah, one point I wanted to actually say about what Bam was saying. I think this is like a really sidebar, but it's just like a couple sentences. But I think that's why team games are so much easier to get into for most people.
Oh yeah.
And fighting games, that's why I don't feel like fighting games are as popular, is because when you play League of Legends or you play any team game, it's so easy. It's so easy. Like, it's the easiest thing in the world. There's nothing easier to just be like, I'm not trash. This guy's trash. Like,
You're
that's-
trash.
It wasn't me. It was that person. And you like funnel on like one mistake. And this is actually something that Void taught me to do really, really well. When it came to League, he was like, "There's only one consistent thing in every single one of your League games when you solo queue.
Mute all.
It's you. It's just yourself.
Oh, okay.
So go over what you could have done better, even if it might have not completely impacted the game to the point where you win. You definitely didn't play perfect. So review what you could have done to could have played perfect and maybe have carried the game and yada yada, right? Because like at the end of the day, other people will make mistakes. Other people on the enemy team will make mistakes, right? It's just how you capitalize and all that other stuff. So just a really important thing about just like team games and fighting games in general. And another thing with picking up mains as well is, what do you want to do? I mean, and another thing as well, before I even get into that, is I think it's really hard for newer players to be like, oh, I don't know what is strong or what's not, which is why I think tier list videos get so much views, right? Because their base understanding of the game is not as developed, right? Like we've had years,
Yeah.
over a decade of like experiencing Smash, right? Not maybe Ultimate specifically, but it's like, oh, super fast frame data, super light. That used to be like the formula, right? And it kind of still is, but kind of got a lot better. Like some of the heavier characters are a lot better, but in the past, heavy trash. Like you got to be fast, you got to be quick. That's all that mattered. Now it's a little different, but we've seen it. We have experience with like seeing different platform fighters and what characters were successful or not, and other players don't. So some players are just like, oh yeah, I feel like this is strong, and they go with it, and that's why they really lean onto the opinions of more experienced like players or people in the community, right? Which is why tier lists are so popular. And then some people with those experience, I won't say have whack opinions, but like have, everyone has different opinions. Let's just put it that way. So everyone has different opinions. So some people get misguided and stuff like that, and yada yada. So I think for newer players, it's very hard to be like, well, I want to play what's strong, but I just don't know what is strong. Like these players say this is strong, these players say this is strong, and like for what reasons and stuff. And everyone has different reasons, right? Like Tweek thinks Sheik is extremely strong because technically you shouldn't really be losing neutral that much. Is that an invalid thought process? No. But if someone just hears Tweek say Sheik is broken, but they don't hear his explanation, right? Because obviously, if whenever Tweek says that, he's not going to explain it every single time, right? Then they're going to be like, oh, well, Sheik is broken, so I'm going to play Sheik. But they don't know why Sheik is broken. You have to have really good neutral and understanding of the game for a character like that to be broken and stuff like that. So, really try and make sure when like obviously you can't just be like, oh, let me like level up my knowledge of the game. Obviously it'll happen over time, but whenever you hear someone's opinion about a character, make sure you get the reasoning too. Don't just like, oh, Lucas is broken because he got top 32 at stuff and that, or top 32 at SmashCon. That's it. Boom. Right. There needs to be reasoning. Well, what characters did he play up against? What was he doing? Was Regalo just extremely prepared for his bracket? When I commentated his match, he looked extremely prepared for the Steve matchup. I don't know if he was or not, but from what it looked like he was, or maybe the Steve wasn't prepared for Lucas, or vice versa, or yada yada, right? So there's definitely reasonings behind things, and especially other top players' opinions. So make sure to look into that. And then also just what do you want to do in the game? Do you want to be quick and nimble, right? I play Fox and I used to play Wolf, and one reason why I stopped playing Wolf was Wolf's a zoner. At the end of the day, I consider Wolf a zoner. You can play him aggressive, you can be up in people's face, but in my opinion, he's a zoner that has above average. Like in if there's a stat line for Wolf, Wolf's above average in everything. So because of that, you zone with him because you need to dip into every single pool a little bit, and you start with zoning, and then boxing situations will eventually come. So now you're getting full value out of Wolf. That is how I view Wolf, right? So do you want to do that? Now there's a lot of top and high tier characters, and to me, in terms of like global rankings, top high tier is where I draw the line, but my high tier dips pretty low. Like my top tier is like top 20, and then my high tier is like probably like top 40, which is like practically half the cast, right? And high tiers to me are like that's where it's like okay, maybe not solo viable, but high tiers counter pick are really strong counter pick characters. Like top tiers in my eyes are characters that are more the more solo viable you are, the more higher you go up in my tier list. That's how I view the game. So you like usually these top tiers have like overall really good matchup spreads, but high tiers win usually like Cloud's a perfect example where Cloud the matchups Cloud wins, he wins really hard, and then the matchups he loses, it's like pretty rough, right? So Cloud or like Luigi is another perfect high tier where I think Luigi's a high tier, but Luigi wins certain matchups like Fox shits on Fox. Really, really good matchup, right? And there's a lot of these other characters that really rely on their combo game, right? So the frame one out is something that it really like halts their win condition. So Luigi's a great high tier character, and in terms of his matchup spread, he wins certain matchups really hard, and then he gets shit on certain matchups really hard. That's why when we see Elegant had a rise and was getting a lot of like top eights, ninth places a lot, and then people started preparing for him, or maybe he started running into certain matchups. Like if he ran into the Buzz, that was a wrap. So like And for Elegant, he would just play through it, and there's nothing wrong with that. But essentially, when you're playing a high tier, you need a sprinkle of bracket luck for certain success, right? Because you want to run into matchups that are more favorable for you. So kind of keep that in mind when making your character decision, where
Yeah,
it's like
or you need a secondary, of course.
or you need a
You can,
secondary, right?
yeah, or like dual main. But yeah, if you solo main a high tier, you usually need a little bit of luck in majors. In majors.
At majors, right? So just keep
Yeah.
in mind, what do you want to do, right? Like, Wolf, more of the zoner. You can play like Wolf's kind of like all around, so you can kind of do whatever with Wolf. Very toolbox. I like to call Wolf like a toolbox character. Wider range of tools that are above average. And then there's characters like Fox, where you are front loading everything into certain aspects, and then you have really shitty weaknesses, right? You're crap off stage, but you're on stage, like, how do you lose neutral? Like we said, how do you lose neutral with Sheik? How do you lose neutral with Fox? You're so fast. You have like one of the best burst options in the game. You have an incredible like dash attack with the movement speed, right? Like, so if you want to be that bait and punish with punish, or bait and punish, or you want to be aggro into someone's face, obviously you're gonna have to. At the end of the day, when you pick a character, you're gonna have to learn how to play them in almost every single play style if you want to play them in top tier, because certain matchups, like, you can't mash on Luigi, like, or you can't mash on Game and Watch with Fox, right? Uh, so you're gonna eventually have to learn how to play a bunch of different ways. But at the end of the day, what do you want to do? Do you want to get rewarded for your spacing? Do you want to get rewarded for your movement? Right? And then so it's like Ramses was saying, what weaknesses are you willing to accept, and what strengths do you think are going to elevate your play? And the great thing is, if you're a newer player, or if you're just bad at the game, you can just do whatever's fun, because you're not like with players with more year into the game, right? Like, say if you're a PGR player and you're kind of like having this character crisis, it gets really hard because, like, shit, well, I'm really good at this, but I want to do this, right? So it's like you're at this crossroad where it's like, fuck, I want to do this, but I'm not as good, so like I have to sink X amount of time, and then blah 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 blah, right? So the more experienced players, it gets way more complicated. But newer players just pick like a top or a high tier that has like a toolkit, like strengths that you enjoy playing. Like, there's satisfaction in the strengths, and then there's weaknesses you can deal with, like they're not going to frustrate you or tilt you off planet Earth, right? And then kind of go from there, and then you'll learn the game, and you'll try to learn the game through that perspective, or like those, like that. When you play Fox, you will get better at whiff punishing, movement. Like, these are all things that if
For sure. Yeah.
you cannot do with Fox, then you definitely can't do it with anyone else, right? Because it's very easy to do that with Fox, so you'll be able to like learn those aspects of the game way quicker, right?
Yeah.
So kind of, I guess what I'm saying is, for newer players, you kind of get to choose your path because your slate is clean. But for more experienced players, your slate's not clean, and that's where you're gonna have to be in like a crossroad, right? Like, if you're someone like Tweek, where or even Leo, right? Leo is a player that proved he can kind of do it all. You're playing like that whiff punish style with Joker. Then he's known for his spacing the most with sword characters and stuff like that. So there's players that can do multiple things, or Tweek, right? We have Wario, there's Diddy, like PT. I mean, Tweek has like probably one of the most widespread character pools at top level, right? So he it's really hard for Tweek because he's so good at so many things, but where are you going to get the most bang for your buck
Yeah.
is the
What do you
big
focus
question
on?
with the experienced players. But I mean, most players, the thing is, I don't think we have to really go into that part of the audience, just because there's going to be more newer players watching this podcast rather than experienced players. I know that it's something we can touch up on, but I definitely want to focus more on like the lower, mid, high level players. And your high level players and your mid level players might have some, years of experience too, right? So I definitely think it's worth like a topic diving into. But I think for the newer players, it's pretty simple. Your slate's clean. What aspects of the game do you like playing, and what aspects of the game do you want to learn rapidly or faster, right?
So the way I look at it is that essentially each pseudo skill level has its own markers, its own benefits and weaknesses. Uh, my advice to newer players who are not entrenched in the community, who aren't familiar with Smash, is just look at 5 different top players tier lists. You can just look at any given ranking. Look for one of the characters, or actually try in training mode every single character that you see in those top tiers for 5 tier lists and see which bread and butter combos you can get consistently. You'll be able to find resources on YouTube. It shouldn't be too hard to find, and whichever characters you can do bread and butters with, keep those, and then try them out. Give them a week apiece. Just see how it feels. Stay with what's comfortable. For people who are entrenched in the community, it's pretty simple. Just pick the top tier that people used to complain about and stopped complaining about, because those are going to be the ones that you're going to get to play, and people will complain, but they're not going to feel like they can complain as much. So that's how you spot a good character, is if people complain about it. For me personally, anytime I pick up a new game, I just look for whichever character gets bitched about the most, and that's whatever I'm going to play. So the people complain when they don't know the solutions to things. And if people don't know the solution to the character, then it's just going to be a lot easier, and usually is going to allow me to at least get myself up to a point where I'm more comfortable. I can learn the game, basically skip certain parts. For mid-level players, just be honest with yourself and say, what part of Smash don't I want to play? So I have kind of the opposite view of Charles on this. I think that, especially in Ultimate, that every character carries you. And so you need to ask yourself, what part of the game don't I want to play? And pick a character that carries you over it. As a rule of thumb, whichever character is going to have the shortest combos is probably going to be the easiest to play in any given fighting game. And so that's not always true, but just a rule of thumb. So for me personally, I don't like going in training mode pretty much at all. Now, you still need to go in training mode, but for me personally, I know that if I want to get carried, I want to get carried through a character that's going to have execution that I can consistently follow through on without having practiced very much. And so I tend to avoid characters like Sheik and gravitate more toward your R.O.Bs, your Donkey Kongs, things like that. And then you get toward the higher tier characters, or higher tier players, I should say. And in that case, once you are a high level player, which in this case, high level I would define as, or rather, I will go ahead and define the specific category of player I'm referring to. The people who are already in among the best in their region, like not just being on PR, but consistently winning their locals, consistently making money. They know if they enter an event and it's not a major, they made money at it. If you're there and you're entering majors and you want to get better, it's probably a case-by-case basis. And if you're not sure what you're supposed to do on a character's crisis, actually reach out and look for a coach to help you out, to actually review your VODs. Because in my experience, most of the time, it's not the character for these high-level players. It is a matter of they aren't seeing benefits and they're just straight up not having a good time. So if you don't enjoy a particular scenario, it's probably not worth it for you to pick up a new character. That's not to say that it isn't always important to play multiple characters, just that a lot of the times you can win through your bad matchups because, as everyone has mentioned, not everyone is fully prepared for you. Not everyone is prepared for every character, every matchup, every play style. And there's usually multiple play styles for every single character. Not always, but especially the better your character gets, the more ways you can probably play that character. And so you can have different ways of playing Mithra and Pyra, and they play different ways on each character. You can practice switching which one of them you're using more. There's just a lot of options that you probably haven't explored yet. And so to go back to the lower level player example and also the previous topic, as for what part of the cast is viable, according to what we have seen, how viable a character is not necessarily determined by how good that character is. For example, one of the least tournament viable characters in data is Pikachu. Now, if you ask people what a top tier is, most seasoned competitors are going to tell you that Pikachu is probably a top tier, at least a high tier. That's not what the results say, though. And so either you need to disregard the data or you need to disregard all these people who are playing in bracket. And so the question is, if the experienced players who are piloting these characters aren't getting the results that you're wanting for yourself, why do you think you're better than them? And if you don't think that you're better than them, then you need to find a simpler character. Be honest with yourself. pick what you can pilot and pilot it as best as you can. Keep learning, keep looking for new experiences. And if you do seek out a coach and they do tell you, listen, I think you just need a pocket character for this matchup, that sometimes that's just the answer. And we do see this at top level play. There is a lot of players that do have pocket characters for specific matchups where they just decide, I'm not doing this anymore. And they do practice it. But the downside to practicing multiple characters is that if you end up in a counterpicking war and they have a counterpick that's good against your character that they're practiced in and you're not, you're still going to lose. And so usually you don't just have to learn one matchup for that counterpick, you have to learn multiple matchups. And so I think people tend to view it as, oh, I just have to learn this one matchup with this character. But in practice, the way that pans out is you have to learn a lot of matchups with that character. And so the time investment ends up being a lot more than people expect it to be and practice. And if you don't invest sufficient amounts of time, your counterpick is going to be even worse than that. And I know in one player I was talking about recently who has been investing with a character they think is top tier is they found out that it's actually not good in matchups that are normally favorable or neutral for that character. And so when they do end up in a counterpicking war with the same players who know what they mean, then they tended to not do so well. So in these kinds of situations, you need to just think about what you're okay with, what scale you're working on, how soon do you need these results, et cetera, and keep working on it. And to go back to my prior example with the player who was not judging himself accurately, they wanted to play a character that wasn't cheating. So they didn't want to play a top tier because they're not really playing Smash. And
no.
Yeah.
Not
So-
this isn't Smash. That's a path you don't want to go down. I've seen players go down that path. You don't want to go down that path.
So I will tell you from having seen a lot of people travel down this path, I straight up told them I'll help you with this, but that's as far as I'll go because I'm going to have to wait for you to learn some hard life lessons. And sometimes it takes people years before they realize there is no Smash. Like, it doesn't matter what your character
Smash
plays.
is a lie.
What is Smash?
Yeah, so
It's all right.
Baby, don't hurt me.
No more.
No more.
So, to be clear, understanding that you can play what characters you need to play, being willing to do what you need to do is its own skill set. And sometimes people have to learn the hard way. I hope for you personally that you listening at home don't have to learn this the hard way, but if you do, Godspeed to you because I feel for you. It's going to be a lot of frustrating situations where you're losing to not Smash and not understanding why you're losing. So,
yeah.
In the meantime, what do you think about that, Bam?
I mean, I agree with you, man. I think that there's a lot of people that will struggle with that from, time to time. And it is a very big life lesson that people need to overcome, right? A lot of people have this whole, the main character syndrome, like we like to call it, right? And everyone thinks they're the protagonist in some shonen manga, and they're all like, I'm going to do this the real way, and I can't touch the dark powers. Like, dude, man, what do you stop?
I'm just a guest on Charles and Bam's podcast, dude. It has been declared. I know where I'm at.
All right. But how many of you in
Secondary
bracket?
character.
How many of you in bracket, especially when we were younger, back in our day when we competed, how many of you guys had like the anime opening or anime ending, playing your headphones, competing? Who did it? Who did it?
No,
I had it on the way to the event.
Not
On the
me,
way
bro.
to the event,
Sorry.
I had it on
I had
blast,
some
dude.
sad, depressing shit on, dude. Like, I wasn't gonna make
You're
it. in
crazy.
life, dude.
You played Sonic though. You
yeah,
calm
you had to do
down.
that.
We needed to hype
Oh, dude.
up.
And then I had
You were
body
calming
and go
down.
home, dude. I didn't even care, dude. I didn't even enjoy my own victories, dude. I just go home. You leave early, dude.
You're crazy. You're crazy.
Oh,
You're built different.
Dude. I was in another-
Hawaii was different, dude. They were playing for the clips.
Oh,
So you
dude.
you had to be Naruto to be part
Yeah,
of Hawaii.
you
It's
really
how it
did.
is.
Though. You really
I was
did.
definitely
I've seen those
listening-
combo videos though. They had anime music in those combo
It
videos.
is.
Oh,
Yeah,
I was
really?
definitely
That's
listening to
how it was.
anime music. And then in Smash 4, when I was like trying to camp, I had to stop. So in Brawl, I would listen to like anime music. And then in Smash 4, I was like, man, why am I losing? I was like rewatching the VODs. I'm like, I'm just fucking fucking spamming dash
Going
attack
in.
because I'm like listening to Kuroko and I'm like, yo, I gotta hit this motherfucker. Like, yo, I gotta get this clip, and then I just get jammed, bro. Like out of
I can
shield,
already
Fox,
see-
like
dude,
reality
I can
check.
see Charles. I can
Yeah,
see Charles
reality
spamming
stone.
Fox dash attack, thinking about Rasengan in his mind. He's like,
Oh, free.
Rasengan.
And
I'm
he
gonna hit
dies.
you with
He's
my
gonna,
broken
this
move.
guy- you can't stop it.
I'm gonna double
Dash
perfect
attack.
pivot up tilt right in your face. Wait, why did I do? Oh.
I just turned my back.
Fox
Yeah.
side B.
Got hit in the
Yeah,
back
it
of the
was,
head.
whenever I play Brawl Falco or Smash 4 Luigi, I had to have like the cheesiest rap music on a playlist I could find. I'm like, yeah, I can vibe to this. I'm just gonna do shit.
Yep.
It's gonna feel
Just go to
great.
work, dude.
Dude, I'm
Clock
like
in.
90% sure the Steve mains nowadays just listen to Yakety sax while they're playing. You know.
Oh my god.
That would be
You
awesome.
guys, the Aaron stream where he was just singing along to Flamingo. That's how it is.
Yes,
That's
the
the
best
state of
clip all
mind.
time.
You
It
got
really is, man. It really is.
Oh my god.
Dude,
yeah.
I love that though.
Transitioning the topic, I think something that's interesting on the topic of like choosing a main and like thinking about how to pick mains is the topic of secondaries, because we kind of like briefly talked about secondaries, but we're seeing more and more dual maining at top level, right? Like
are.
of course
lot.
Proto Benham kind of starting off with Lucina, Min Min, the Buzz obviously has Rosalina, Olimar. Shuton has Olimar, Aegis. Zachary has like 3 characters, you know, Joker, Rob, Game and Watch. It's common, and I think it makes sense because counter picks, especially in America where the rule set is a little bit different, also gives you an advantage in terms of like stages, right? Like your opponent counter picks you to Battlefield, you still get to change characters. You go to a character that's broken on Battlefield, right?
Which is broken, very broken.
Which is insane. Yeah,
Yes.
Battlefield and FD especially, because like if you know, like if you're playing as Shuton, you gotta ban Aegis' best stages, and Olimar's best stages while avoiding counterpicking any of them, which hard to say the least. Min Min, Lucina, arguably even harder, with how polarizing Min Min can be. So I think like that's a topic that is super interesting to me. Is like how do you judge like a character's viability based on the potential of secondaries? Because I feel like characters that are easier to have secondaries for, like a Joker, right? Because Joker loses to a very, very specific archetype of characters, generally. Like I think that makes a character better as well. Whereas a character like you know, let's say Wolf, right? Wolf has a good all-around matchup spread, but he loses to characters that are kind of like all over the place, right? So I think to me that's like a more and more important thing is that finding a character that is easy to have a secondary for. Also in terms of like the difficulty of the secondary, right? Because if your secondary is Palutena, you're having a way better time than if your secondary is Pikachu. Because you know, like secondary Pikachu doesn't really exist. So what do you guys think? How do you guys think secondaries kind of like play into viability? I feel like, of course, I mean this needs to be said, but to us kind of obvious. I think for newer players, secondary should kind of be like a you know, a nice to have, but not really a priority. But for experienced players, secondaries are kind of where we're building towards in the meta. It looks like to me.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we're definitely getting to a point where people are having secondaries or they're dual maining, like you were saying before.
Yeah.
And I think that is like extremely impactful. Like where, like if you can have a character that's like, this is the, it's. I mean, it's kind of one of those things where it's like, I mean, we're talking about Naruto, so let's use the Naruto reference here. Neji,
up,
right?
man.
Like, right?
Oh my god.
Yeah, right. So like you're talking about Neji, right? And it's like, oh, he has his blind spot, right? But obviously, because he knows that's that one single point of entry, right? You're able to cover that and compensate for that, right? And that's kind of like what you were talking about for Joker, right? Where it's it's like the same kind of thing, right? Where it's like, oh, I know this is the one character the archetype that really is the one that's going to cause me problems. So because of that, it's very easy for me to be like, I know how I can cover that, right, and circumvent that kind of hole. And it's like at the same time, I'm also leading you there because trying to get me in any other way is going to be way harder, right? And that's kind of the beauty of that. So I think that absolutely is something that's huge when it comes into player. I mean, heck, even if we're talking about just general like strategies, right, and like military tactics, like you have those things, right, where it's like, oh, okay, we're gonna have this whole area and this is gonna be sectioned off and we're trying to lead you into a certain place, right, Or like even when you're conditioning someone, right? We're trying to lead you into a certain entry where I know this is going to be how you're going to approach. This is how you can get there, and I'm controlling that as well with my secondary option. So I think that is
Kind
like
of. Yeah, no, totally agree. Kind of building off of
yeah,
that, I think in the current meta, especially with the, like all like the Steves becoming bigger, and of course, like if someone is a decent Kazuya, they're gonna make it into the higher parts of the bracket because like high mid-level players just don't do well against characters like that because they kind of like test how consistently good your execution and knowledge is, which is only really adequate at the higher levels. So like just having something for that quote unquote blind spot, right? Steve and Kazuya, it's gonna become a must-have, right? Not like we can talk. Okay, well, if you have a high tier, you need some sort of bracket look. If your top tier loses to Steve, you're not gonna win majors. You're just not. Not even like maybe if you're super lucky in a bracket, but like in terms of blind spots, like those are like high priorities. And luckily for the community, there's one boy who is pretty easy and very strong against both, who is Cloud. Cloud does well against both and is relatively easy to pick up. But of course there are other options. I feel like in that sense, like knowing that your blind spot isn't necessarily just like, oh, this is what my character is bad at, but also kind of relating it to the meta prevalence of characters, super important, which is also why for a long time, Pikachu was thought to be such a good character because, well, he loses matchups, but the matchups were, back then was Ness, Game Watch, Mario, and while Ness is relatively common, the other two are like super uncommon, right? So like those losing matchups are way less impactful than losing to, for example, Rob and Palutena. Um, so yeah, totally agree with you, Ben. I just wanted to add a little bit of nuance to what you're saying because I think um, it's a good thing to keep in mind if you're picking like your secondary to think about like just the meta prevalence, which is something that Tony talked about as well at the beginning of the session. Is like, okay, well, when you pick a character, think about how your meta looks like and how the meta looks that you want to grow towards, right? Because something that's scalable in your local might not be scalable on a major platform.
yep,
Right. Also,
absolutely.
oh, you want to go, Tony?
I was going to say, as an example, most top tier lists are going to factor in top tier metagame. Top tier metagame primarily is fast sword characters, characters with high mobility, and basically just swords. It's pretty straightforward. That is probably not your local meta. And so you need to kind of bias your character selection accordingly. If you don't have Roy's and Aegis all over the place, you probably shouldn't be playing the same top tiers as everybody else that you see placing in the top eights because those are the characters that beat the Roy's and Aegis to get there. As far as a secondary, I think that for me personally, whenever I'm recommending, I just kind of look at the Orion rank character popularity because generally those measure for overall popularity and include mostly like mid-level player results and such that are going to heavily affect the numbers in addition to top level play. And when you're looking at what a secondary character is, similar to how I referenced the time investment you need to make earlier, generally these are going to be the more accessible characters that require less investment to get into. And this is going to include your wolves, your Robs, your Roys, et cetera, et cetera. These are characters that a lot of top players can pick up and play. If you don't see somebody calling your character brain dead, that character is probably not the best secondary possible. So you want to keep it simple. I don't care how smart you think you are. Everyone needs to keep it simple. Leo should keep it simple. And so you are not Leo.
Simple, dude. Simple is optimized. The simpler
Yes.
your decision making is, the more optimized it is.
Yeah,
Just like that. Yeah.
Keep it simple, stupid. That's the acronym for a reason.
Yep. Yep.
There you go. Well, so even going down, like I know Bam was talking a little bit about archetypes. So I guess at this point we can kind of go over some examples. I know we've all coached top players and kind of through some of their character crises. I've coached Void and Tweek in the past. Void in Smash 4 beginning of Ultimate, and then Tweek like for 2 years in Ultimate. Uh, but Void was very simple because Void just pretty much played one character. There was a point where like Pichu was getting nerfed, and like even before Pichu got nerfed, it was like people were figuring out Pichu, but Void was getting results with Pichu, so it snowballed into like people figuring out Pichu. Oh wow, just camp, surprise, and then Pichu then getting nerfed. So then Void was in a character crisis for quite some time. Um, and that was really hard because Void has a very specific archetype that he likes. He likes very high execution, combo orientation. He likes to overwhelm his opponents in these scramble situations, and he's very quick on his feet, so he usually succeeds in those situations. So characters that don't want to interact with him was giving him trouble. So you want to break down, and I know so this is going to apply more for like high to top level players because when we say like go for the simple stuff, which was successful, really successful, and still can be successful nowadays, but was very successful in all levels of play year one of the game. Everyone's like Pocket Wolf, Pocket Palu, Pocket Rob. That was very successful for at all levels, and then people. The thing about going with those pocket levels or pockets when you get to high to top level players when you fight them, everyone knows that matchup really well. So
Yep.
that's when you're going to start seeing a fall off. Not in terms of like you're going to see a fall off in success of like, oh wow, I'm just playing something really simple and it's effective. And then when you start challenging players that are better than you, it's like, okay, well, it's simple and effective, but I also need to beat them as the player, right? So that's when that's gonna, which is fine because then you'll still be able to grow, right? So it's by no means that's still a great way to grow because you have all the tools, right? And then you just get to see what you're fundamentally doing wrong, which is the main takeaway for improvement in the long run, right? But for in talking in our experiences with high end top level players, you really got to break down what tools you need to get through what, right? So for Void, it was kind of just like, okay, well, try Joker, didn't like Joker for a bit, played Palu, played Peach, and it was really hard because even past then, it kind of just ended up him just going back to Sheik, which was his Smash 4 main, which just sucks because that was the character he felt the most comfortable with and he had the most fun playing, but it just didn't feel as strong. And Void did have a resurgence with Sheik in terms of performances, and then again, we were kind of talking about earlier, people weren't really ready for it, right, for the surge in Sheik meta, and then people started figuring out how to play against Sheik. And then we started seeing Sheik's bad matchups really flesh out, like Ice Climbers and other things like that, where she just really struggles with characters that can force trades and don't really care about like the scramble situation or the really good frame data, right? You can just really force trades and just beat her out. And then after that, Void kind of like started delving into content creation, so didn't really get to go past that certain point. And then Smash where he just solo main Sheik. So a lot of my coaching with him was just about the game. But with Tweek particularly, I have a lot of experience with this because a lot of the times we had to look at what Tweek likes in a character, and I think what Tweek one of the things he likes in characters is very good air drift, and slight air drift mix-ups, which is what Wolf and Wario bring to the table. Whereas Pokemon Trainer doesn't do that, and I think that was one of the reasons why he wanted to quit Pokemon Trainer.
Kind of just to jump in real quick. Like
Yeah, yeah.
Squirtle has some of the best acceleration, so like he can adjust his drift really quickly. It just doesn't have a lot of drift. It's kind of like Palutena in that sense because Paul can do like a drift forward fair and then be
And then
drifting
drift back.
back on the
Right,
descent.
right.
Yeah, Squirtle can do that too, but just like all three of their max airspeed is just really poor. But his control is really solid. Anyway, continue. Just wanna
Right, right.
say
And then
that.
Switch cutting his momentum, and
Yeah, yeah.
we've had a Pokemon Trainer episode talking about why PT was very successful in the very beginning of the meta, and like now kind of like not bad, but not like crazy up there, has the potential, yada yada, right? So switched off of Pokemon Trainer, went into other characters, and with Tweek, it was always like because he won a tournament with Roy. Like Tweek was really hard for me to coach because he's like an exception of like, dang, you can really just play all of these characters at a top level, but we just got to figure out which one's the best for him. And usually I never recommend more than two to any normal players. You want to go to max, right? But there's players that have exceptions that are like Tweek, like Leo, that can play more than two, and that's where it gets very complex. And I try to do it for like on paper strategy. So it's like so my mentality before DLC Pack 2 came out and he started playing Diddy, I was like, well, play Diddy Wolf because Diddy fundamentally is a character where if your opponent cannot deal with banana and they have to fight banana, Diddy becomes a very strong character. Diddy before DLC Pack 2, and I still believe this to this day. Well, specifically before DLC Pack 2, against the current top tiers that were succeeding, Diddy was very strong. There was a lot of Palu. There was like a lot of Joker. I think Diddy, like, if not wins, goes at least even in those matchups, right? So it was at the time a very good meta pick, right? And really the only characters that kind of screwed you over or Pac-Man, or like Duck Hunt characters, and this is before Steve came out, by the way. So this is like characters that shut down banana, right? Hydrant comes down, your banana is now shut down. What makes your character good? Now you have to like navigate around this hydrant, right? Can is down, Gunman is down for Duck Hunt, right? Stuff like that. Samus has a weird trip animation, all that jazz, right? What so these weird zoners, so kind of classifying archetypes and what beats and shuts down banana. Well, what beats weird zoners? Wolf, right? Wolf has every toolkit. You have the reflector, you can outzone the zoners, you can reflect their zoning, and all the current best Pac-Man players at that time, like I said, this was before DLC Pack 2, solo main Pac-Man. So you see how much information is going into my thought process when I'm advising Tweek, right? I'm like, hey, this is everything. All the Pac-Man mains, they just main Pac-Man. You don't even have to learn other Wolf matchups. Just go Wolf and you just shit on him, right? And he did find success with like he has set wins on T with Wolf, right? So we know it has worked before. So Tweek ended up not going down that path, but just and that's completely fine. Just because something's on paper, the player still has to want to do it, right? And if the player like doesn't think Wolf is strong enough or doesn't like playing Wolf or whatnot, right? Like that's fine too. But I'm just saying, in terms of strategizing something, a thought process, that is kind of the thought process. Now, in current day, if I always like whenever Tweek asks, I currently don't coach Tweek anymore, but whenever I give my opinion on his character roster, I usually say stuff like, well, if you want to stay Diddy, right? You still want to play Diddy because I think Diddy's still a really good pick. I think nowadays you want to go Diddy Cloud because Wolf kind of doesn't beat these other top like the current meta characters right now. Wolf doesn't really beat them or like could go even, right? But like when you counterpick, you want it to have a punch. You want it to be like you don't want to counterpick into an even matchup. What are you like if you want to counterpick like you know what I'm saying? Like make it a little easier on yourself because this is a character you're not as refined with, right? So you want to give yourself that edge to compensate for the lack of time you have in that character. That's the whole point of counterpicks in general. So that's the general goal of that. And Cloud is a character that kind of goes through Hydrant, right? Like you can attack through Steve blocks. You can when your opponent is setting up like terrain or some other obstacle to not interact with you, Cloud usually can truck through those things because he has the movement, because he has the disjoint, and because he has the punch, right? Characters like Sheik and Diddy can have a lot of hard time. I'm going to bring up Pac-Man as another example to disarm the Hydrant because they have to use multiple moves to do it, unless it's a smash attack, which is very laggy, right? The Cloud does not give a fuck about that, and he's just going to just hit the Hydrant and not care, or just use his air mobility along with his disjoints to navigate around those things. So again, that is kind of like my day and age, like back before DLC Pack 2 or Fighter Pass 2, and then now currently trying to pair a character with Diddy Kong that covers Diddy Kong's weaknesses that makes sense on paper, and Cloud is also low effort. Plus, we're seeing Cloud have success via Spargo. So, like, we know the character has success in these matchups. We're seeing it with a Cloud main, right? And I know Spargo kind of was switching around characters too. And then, but Tweek end up like currently now has gone with Pokemon Trainer and Wario, going back to some of the characters that he's previously found success with, which also makes sense. I mean, when you look at Tweek's career, his highest highs were when he was playing Wario, Pokemon Trainer, stuff like that, right? So trying to pair that
Diddy,
with his
he
Diddy
was
as well.
playing Diddy as Shine too, right? Yeah. So three
Right, right,
characters. Which is
right.
insane.
His three most successful characters, and he's just saying, "Fuck it, I'm gonna try that out." But
Yep.
at least, and this is like that's not a really on paper way of thinking, but at least one of those characters cover the on paper aspect of Ivysaur being like, oh, you're not going to interact with me. Like I have Ivysaur forward air to like destroy 6 Steve blocks. I can also Razor Leaf through a Pac-Man Hydrant fairly safe, and it goes the projectile will go through it, right? I have humongous disjoints to deal with characters with bullshit disadvantage like Steve Anvil and stuff like that, right? Like I have just like these really large disjoints because right now in the meta we're seeing certain characters like Steve that have this disadvantage that's very hard to pressure and not get reversaled, right? And sword characters give you that luxury of like, oh, you have a high reversal disadvantage. I don't deal with that shit. I'm Pyra up air, or I'm Ivysaur up air. Hold that shit. You know what I'm saying? So you always got to think of what the current meta is and what tools your character like. Why is your character losing? why does Diddy lose to Pac-Man? Why are you getting frustrated in this? Okay, so like banana, blah blah blah, right? Like really breaking down the matchup and understanding what wins you the matchup, what loses you the matchup, right? And it's like, okay, well, what other tools counteract that, and we want bang for our buck, right? So kind of thinking along those mentalities. So that's pretty much my main experience with the top players I've coached within Smash in terms of character crisis, counter picking, maining, solo maining, all that jazz.
True, man. Dude, that was just a good speech. I don't know what to say.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure
uh,
you guys have also coached other like higher top
yeah.
level players as well. Like I think sharing example stories is really good.
My personal experience is that character choice is very much tied to ego and self-perception, which makes it a very, very difficult topic to coach.
Oh,
Um,
that's the next level stuff. I didn't even
that's the hard things to talk about. I'll give you an example that is not really coaching related, but like my personal player experience, which is that like
top
I almost quit
player
this game.
experience. Hold up,
Yeah, well,
get it straight, man.
not back then. No,
Oh
dude.
snap! Not
Anyway,
back then. Oh, snap.
back then it was small. No. But I almost quit this game when I played PT because the characters didn't fit me. And me switching to Shulk was like a huge thing because kind of what we talked about with character maining before is that like you kind of want to pick characters that fit your strengths. Well, Shulk was kind of the opposite of what I like to do, right? It's research management, slow frame data, slower character, like stuff that I'm not used to. But it worked out in the long run, and I think what I've kind of reflected on after coaching others is that like the difference there is that for me, like the character is not like a part of my identification. So like whether I'm a Pokemon trainer player or a Shulk player, like it doesn't matter to me. Whereas I feel like for the top players that I've coached, it's like no, I am the I don't know, I am the Donkey Kong player. I cannot stop playing Donkey Kong because I am the Donkey Kong player. It's tied to their identity, it's tied to their cloud, it's tied to their results. And when you like coach them to pick something else up, which is why I have a lot of respect for Tweek's character switching. You're kind of telling them like you're gonna get worse results for a while. And for Tweek, like he grinds so much, we see a lot less of those effects. But if you think about like a good recent example is when he picked up Aegis, where he didn't have enough time to really grind out Aegis to the level where he would like them to be. He enters an event and he doesn't do as well as he wanted to. And like he knew that, everyone knew that. But he still took that dive to see how it will work out. A lot of top players will never, ever do that, which is why secondaries is kind of what they go for because they still get their identity, their cloud, etc. Well, while picking up a more viable roster altogether. So I think in that sense, what I think is very interesting is kind of like that aspect of picking a character, picking a secondary is like the identity part of it. Like, can you imagine Light not playing Fox? I literally cannot. He is Fox, dude. Like maybe he'll play Roy, something like that, which is like Sword Fox basically. You do shut up Nair and down tilt and combos. But yeah, I think that aspect is often very understated. So not really much of a point to the rest of the rant, but I just think it's a very interesting element that's often a part of the equation. And if you are in a character crisis or thinking about making a character, I think it's something to think about. It's like, how do you identify with the character that you're playing? Some people get more motivated by playing a character that they identify with. Or like something that I hear is like, oh yeah, dude, I love Metroid. I'm gonna play Zero Suit Samus. Well, I mean, sure, go ahead, right? But that also means that is part like, this is what I talked about at like the beginning of the podcast. Like you got to identify the goals that you have within the game, and if that is having fun, then like that part of self identification that might be part of the fun. Um, and maybe it's not for you, right? So think about that as well, right? How much is that a part of my decision making? How important is that to me? And how important do I want it to be, right? Like because a lot of people, because they don't think about it, they don't really factor it in when they're making their decision.
The way I tend to look at it is a bit colder and more pragmatic. So I actually tend to look at players as being mechanics, rather specific mechanisms through which their circumstances can flow. And to elaborate on what that means, like I view every single top player for all the research I've done on them. I have not found a top player without a glaring weakness or inability to do certain things. Like they're just so thoroughly biased towards what they're going to do that they're always going to have big blind spots. Like a more commonly known example is obviously like Leia with sword characters. So if you play a character that beats all the sword characters, but hypothetically has an unwinnable matchup versus, let's say, Little Mac, you're good against Leo because he's not going to play Little Mac against you. So I don't have any particular players I'd like to name, but just using Tweek as an example, the way I look at and classify those players are players with considerable restrictions. And by that, I mean, you are looking at a problem, you have a goal. So for Tweek, I believe his goal is roughly to be the best player in the world. It's not exactly it, but I don't want to be too specific, but he has certain biases on what he is and isn't willing to do in terms of his gameplay choices. And so the question is, well, what is he willing to do for that? Now, as Ramses mentioned, he's willing to be more pliable with his character selection, increasingly so as time goes on and he gains more experience because he's less willing to stick to his guns on the matter. And so when you're talking about this stubbornness, I think as someone trying to help him solve that problem, what I personally would do is I would actually just say, okay, I'm going to try and convince him to change his mind on these things. I'm going to just say, this is what it is. And I'm going to then try and solve that problem within those restrictions. So in this case, I know when I had a conversation with him back at CEO, I actually told him I think that Sephiroth is very good, that just not the way he is willing to play Sephiroth. And so we talked about why he's willing to play the way he is and such. And ultimately, I don't think he is willing to play Sephiroth the way he should play Sephiroth. And so it's not that he can't do it. It's that he probably won't, or rather.
But then, to be fair, that means that his goal is not just purely to be the best in the world, right? Yeah. So that's something that should be very clear. Like, if you're not willing to do something that you can do to win, then you're not trying to be the best in the world.
Yes.
Right.
Well, and he wants to be. It's like a caveat, right? Like, I want to be the best in the world my way.
On my
that
terms.
Is exactly, right. And that is a very
that's
big
Naruto
thing with
as
a lot
fuck,
of people.
Bro.
But it's such a huge thing that a lot of people tend to gloss over, right? They're like, oh, listen, I want to win this, and they complain. It's like there's a lot of times when the reason why is because it's not saying that like all these people aren't capable, or like it seems like hypothetically they're capable, but they're not really, because they've gone ahead and they've put this disclaimer that no, I'm not looking to win. I'm looking to win in this specific fashion, and if I cannot win in this specific fashion,
that's fine.
Then I'm not winning, right? And it is fine, right? But sometimes
it's not fair to say I'm trying to win as like my end goal if there's so many caveats to it. That's basically the point I'm making.
That's when
you got to be honest
with
yourself.
Agreed.
Yeah. All right, Tony, continue. We're derailing.
I'm on the same page in general. However, my role as a coach, or honestly, I think of myself as more of an analyst, but I view myself as a tool at their disposal. And so it doesn't really matter whether if I think that I can change their mind, then I will try. But if somebody tells me, listen, I want to walk to Mars, I can say, listen, that's physically impossible. But like I said before, you want
I'm an analyst. You cannot walk to Mars. More news at 11.
That's your total wisdom for the day. You can't walk to Mars.
You can't walk to Mars, man.
But with this case, the question is, well, can I think of a way to do so, theoretically? Which I actually could. Let's say we could actually create a surface theoretically to reach Mars. Now, is that practical? Probably not. But if that's your most practical solution, then that's what you're going to go for. Like, for example, in Tweek's case, because there are certain things he's not willing to do as part of his. Some of those are things that he can actually like outsource. Like he can, if he doesn't want to look at specific parts of his VODs, for example, he can have someone like Charles go ahead and look at those, come to conclusions, and then independently decide, listen, you need to practice these things because it's gonna help you solve these problems with your VODs. Even though Tweek wasn't part of that teamwork, if it's the most pragmatic, most practical form you can find there, then that's just what you got to do. And so, even though I agree with Ramses, most of the players I work with, especially like anytime I'm helping a top 10 PGR player, they always have these kinds of hangups. And so,
True.
you can't be the best player in the world if that's what your mindset is. If someone is at your skill level and willing to, because all of our current top players, including Leo, currently have those kinds of asterisks on their goals. We don't actually have someone who is both skilled and practiced enough to reach that skill level and also ruthless enough to do whatever they need to do to get there. They aren't actually using all of their tools at their disposal.
Ooh.
So I think that's why we are still able to see these top players reach this point, because that's just the limitation of how good Smash players are at the moment. So I do think that hypothetically, if we did have the League of Legends player base, that our top 10 would not still be top 10. Like, not a single one of them.
Dude, none of them are
yeah.
actually ruthless. None of them are doing.
Yeah,
the,
they're definitely not
like
whatever
Tweek
it
said,
takes.
None of them
They're
are
not
doing
whatever
the
it
best
takes.
shot. Yeah, they're
None
not
of them.
whatever it takes.
Oh yeah.
But-
League of Legends,
but-
whatever it takes.
Exactly,
Millions of
whatever it
dollars on
takes.
the line. Like you're set. You set yourself and your next like 5 generations up for life. You know what I mean? Like it's
but
that
that's
much is on
also
the line.
charm. That's also the charm that Smash has. It's not whatever it takes. But
Yeah.
the only thing, like, all I'm asking for people is to be honest with me, right? Like, if you say,
Yep.
I want to be the best in the world, and then your bio is Dr. Mario main, I'm like, no, dude, you're
Stop
not,
capping,
dude.
No.
No.
Stop freaking capping.
Yeah,
and
Oh, go ahead.
it's being honest with yourself, like we talked about, like admitting, like taking responsibility, being honest with yourself. That's where growth starts. So it's fine to say it's not whatever it takes for me, but at the same time, right? Like if you limit yourself, and this is like a very ruthless thing to say, and I don't agree with it myself, but on paper, like if it's not whatever it takes and you lose, then you shouldn't be sad about losing, because you have these priorities that lead to you limiting yourself, and then you lose. It's like, well, your own damn fault, right? Like if you're doing whatever it takes and you lose, then you get to be sad. But of course, like in practice, the world is a little bit more humane and empathetic, which I am as well, which I'm grateful for. But I've like it's a bit of like on paper, it's like, like if you're limiting yourself, if you're playing Dr. Mario and you lose to like a random Lucina player and you get really sad, I'm like, I get it, I get why you're sad, but at the same time, like, why are you playing Dr. Mario, dude? If winning and losing means that much to you, if it means that much to you, what are you doing? But I will still be sad for you if you lose.
I have no empathy for that. I'm sorry. I'm gonna keep it a buck. I'm definitely a person where I see that idea and I'm like, yeah, get jammed.
Dang,
how dare you?
Bam,
How free, dude? How dare you have the audacity to think that you're that godlike? Like, get jammed.
Because it's like
all of that.
It's kind of like an ego thing.
It's
an ego thing because
a lot of it is an ego thing. You keep it a buck, right? Some of it sometimes is a passion. Like, I love this character. Like, dude, you don't love Dr. Mario, bro. Come on, together. Stop at me, because I'm not falling for it. Are you falling for it? You must be, because I'm not.
Dang.
Get jammed. Good. Go ahead and get jammed. I love that. I love
Bam
it.
is like, all of y'all are soft serve. Get out of here.
Yeah, soft serve. Not me, bro.
Oh my god.
Well, it's like weird because it's like, oh, I'm gonna be the fastest man in the world. You race Bolt and you have weights on, and then you barely lose him, and you're like, oh my god. Oh my god! How did I lose?
Get out of here.
Oh my god!
Nah,
it's like, dude, what? You have weights on? You're fucking racing the fastest guy on the planet. Like, what do you think's gonna happen?
Yeah,
you know what I mean? So it's kind of like that. It's definitely not as black and white as that, but I will say I do agree with the fact that maybe our top 10 would be, some of them would be the same if our game was more competitive, because it would force the players to be more ruthless, right? Because it's like, I feel like the players aren't ruthless right now because, like, oh, I want to do what I want to do. I want to do things my way, yada yada, right? But there are tipping points. And actually, I have two stories, real like last stories from coaching experience. And one, they're both in Smash 4. One is with Void and one is with Elegant. Okay. So this is an example of like the one and only time that Void was ever like really stubborn in Smash 4 when I was coaching him, and he never, at this point, he never beat Okay, well, he finally did get one set on the Buzz, and when he beat the Buzz, he won a tournament, which was Smash and Splash, his one and only set versus the Buzz. But this was actually versus Como. He was struggling versus Como, and I was like,
Sonic.
yes, Sonic. And actually, no, there's been a couple of times Void has been stubborn. I told Void to pick up Cloud for the Buzz, and he said, "Fuck that! I'm not doing that. I'm gonna beat him with Sheik." He eventually did. I think he would have beat him a lot more if he had a Pocket Cloud like everyone else. Everyone cashed out the Buzz wins with Cloud. It was, I won't say it was free, but like if you're a top player and you play Cloud, you had a pretty good shot against the Buzz. I mean, the character was very good against his character and very easy to pick up,
Yeah.
but very broken. But Void being stubborn there did get his one win on the Buzz. I think he could have got more. And then against Como, I told him that he had to time Como out. I was like, these Japanese players, they will not approach you. They play by the book. They will not approach you. You got to time them out. And he was like, I'm not doing that. And I'm like, if you're not timing him out, then you have to edge guard Sonic. That's your only other win condition. And he's like, I'm going to edge guard Sonic. He didn't edge guard Sonic. And you can actually, if you look at the VODs at Hyrule Saga, he was so frustrated that there was a point where I don't know if he was winning or losing, but Como was just standing in the corner and he stood center stage and he did not move. Like usually Void's moving and stuff, and he didn't move for like 3 seconds. And I asked him afterwards, I was like, "Why didn't you move?" He was just like, "I just wanted to show the world what Como was doing." Like I stood still for like 3 seconds just to show the world what he was doing, and like show the world, dude. And like at the end of the day, like Como is someone that's ruthless. Like he will do whatever it takes.
Yeah,
He will spin dash in the corner till there's like a minute left. Then he will approach.
Yeah.
Like he will test you till the end, right? And yeah, Void struggled with Como for pretty much his entire career because of Sonic, because he couldn't edge guard Sonic, because he was not willing to time out the character, right? And like Tony said, when you're a coach, you are simply a tool at the player's disposal. I will use my time to review your VODs and give you notes, so you don't have to. So you can allocate that time to playing the game more, and it kind of like streamlines the whole, the whole process. Or I can also give you my input, and you can take it or leave it. Right? Obviously, I'm not a top player, so you can pretty much every single player I've coached has respected my opinion just via like my study and time I put into the game, just like via studying it and stuff like that. So, and then Elegant was the other story where this, so I told Elegant he wanted to beat Ken Sonic at the championships, and he was at my house. We were looking at his VODs, and he was like, "Charles, I like really want to beat him." And then I just like gave him a side glance. I was like, "How badly do you want to beat him?" And this is
How ruthless are you?
yes. And he was like, he looked at me. He was like, "I'll do anything." And and then I told him, I was like, "You have to time him out." And guess what happened at the championship? If you guys remember that match, he timed him out, and he double jumped. He cycloned off the top on the very last second. So you can look up that VOD, Ken versus Elegant.
Oh no, I remember that.
Smash 4 championships. He timed him out. He listened to what I said, and he got the dub. So, because I mean, like I said, a lot of these Japanese players, especially in Smash 4, they still do it to this day. But they are ruthless. They play to win with the characters, tools that they have, and they will play it by the book every single time. And they know that time is a resource, and if they have 5 minutes to test your patience, they're going to test your patience for 5 minutes. And then when it gets down to 1 or 2 minutes, then they will approach, because that is on paper what you do, right? So because it's like when I was looking at Elegance VODs versus Ken, or just against a lot of Sonic players, I'm just like, you're running in as Luigi and you're fucking Luigi. So, I mean, Luigi did have a really good dash grab in Smash 4, but really outside of that, like your air drift is not great, your rising aerials are not like super amazing. Spin dash kind of just like beats everything out. You could cancel spin dash into shield. Like Luigi approaching onto Sonic was really hard, but when Sonic got an opening, when Luigi got an opening, he did a ton of damage. So you get that one opening, you do a bunch of damage, and then you camp a fireball. Like that was what you had to do. And I think that's the only set in Elegant's life that he times someone out. And I don't think he does not like timing people out. He will generally approach and all that stuff, but I don't know why, but for that one tournament, he looked me in the eye and said, "I'll do whatever it takes."
Whatever it takes.
Whatever it takes, man. And
So
that
he did.
right, and that's what he did, right? So just some interesting stories. I know a lot of it's like from Smash 4 and stuff, but I've seen both sides of the coin for sure. When players are absolutely ruthless, whether it be character picks or strategies in the game, and I've seen players be stubborn, and sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. But generally, most like high to top level coaches and analysts of the game will tell you like there is on paper answers that you should be doing, right? Because it's like, oh well, approaching into this move with these tools, your percentage chance of winning, like you have to like read them do this and then counterplay with this, and they could also just do this and blah 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 blah. There's like it's not like by the numbers kind of stuff, but it kind of isn't, but it kind of isn't because like there's obviously mix, right? But at the end of the day, there's always like an outplay ratio, right? Which is essentially what a
There's
matchup is.
expected risk reward, right?
Exactly,
Which
exactly.
is by the numbers, but then like there's a lot of human element that you kind of have to feel out in the moment.
Right, and that's
and
what
and
matchups
that's
are.
for players and coaches.
Yeah, that's for players.
So,
Yeah, for sure. So
so
like
it,
we build frameworks, but they have to navigate them, right?
Yeah,
and I know for me personally, like I make mistakes all the time. Like when I talked with Ramses when he was preparing for SkyJ, there were plenty of times where I'd say, "Hey, I think you should do this," and he'd just say, "Hey, this doesn't work. I tried this and this. That doesn't work." And I'd say, "Okay, well, let's try a different solution."
right.
And like on the same front, like part of the reason Ramses does so well with Shulk, in my opinion, is that he is just so thorough with his preparation, and it gives him an outlet for that thoroughness. And so there's plenty of times where I will recommend a situation or think that he's going to do better, and he's more familiar with that situation. I work with so many players who are much better players than me, and will understand their character much better than I do. So what I generally bring to the table is that at this point I probably know over 1,000 matchups in the game. And so, like in terms of my creative viewpoint, I'm going to have a lot of experience in looking at situations from just different unique angles. And but those won't necessarily be better decisions than what the player is going to bring to the table. I'm wrong all the time. And I'm also willing to accept that I'm wrong all the time. And so when things do go wrong, when let's say hypothetically Void did refuse to time out Como and then he'd won, then like and putting myself in Charles's shoes, like I'd just say, okay, well, why wasn't that necessary? What was the solution Void found? Like, let's say Void did edge guard Sonic, then he'd say, okay, and so we found the B plan uh, of the solutions that he was willing to implement, and he pulled it off. And if he didn't, what can we do to get him to edge guard better?
Right.
Yeah.
So, like, you have to be able to humble yourself enough to acknowledge that you are not the person, that other people are going to have strengths that you might not necessarily have, whether you are the player or the coach. And I think that the people who do find success in that relationship are the ones who are able to actually reach out and say, hey, these are my problems. I'm going to try out the solutions that you tried or that you recommended. I don't really like those, but they're better than what I've got on the table right now. So I think that those are the most hallmark notions of success for me personally that I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're all learning the game together, right? And like the main things coaches do, at least through my perspective, is like, okay, even if we haven't seen a matchup get played, right, or have very little information on the matchup, let's think about tools. We usually are really good at like, okay, this character's tool does this, and then we'll hit it up against this character's tool. If they do it about the same time, like who wins, who beats out, right? It's like kind of explaining like the Diddy Kong thing against Hydra and stuff like that. I know it's a very simple tool to break down, or actually, like Banana can get a little
It's
complex
pretty
depending on the game.
complex. Yeah, it's pretty
Right.
complex,
But
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 give
yeah, like
yourself some credit.
like just understanding tools and how they cross reference and how they interact with each other. But then
Mhm.
a lot of it is in theory, and then we see a game get played out, and then it's like, oh, okay, maybe like this was better than what I thought, and yada yada. It kind of like depends on how much information we have on the matchup and like what level of VODs we're watching, right? Because a lot of these players when they're swapping around characters and stuff, we see new matchups being played at top level that we've never seen get played at top level before. I might have seen it at like a local, I might have seen it at like a high level get played out, right? Like certain matchups, but when you're watching it unfold at top level, it's like, okay, these players are bringing these characters to whole nother levels with their play styles as well, right? So
Yep.
kind of like theorizing there, and then even past that, how well coaches and players will VOD review past that, right? Because I mean, even for example, Leo did a great job at preparing for Diddy. Leo and Last did a great job preparing for Diddy like after Summit, right? And Leo was able to come back and like I believe like post quarantine they go back and forth. I think Tweek has like a slightly higher win rate post quarantine on Leo, but it's cool to see the dynamic, right? The back and forth, because the first summit we were back from quarantine, Tweek won that summit with Diddy, and in my opinion, it was pretty clear that a lot of people weren't ready for the Diddy matchup. People were getting Z drop dared like nothing. I remember at that tournament, that was the last tournament I was like officially Tweek's coach, like under TSM, and people were asking me like, who do you think's gonna win the tournament? I was like, I think Tweek's gonna win, and they're like, oh, you're just saying that because like you're TSM and you're his coach. I'm like, you guys think people are ready for the Diddy matchup? Like Tweek's been grinding all quarantine with Diddy, and like the best practice people got against him is like on Wi-Fi, and Diddy offline is way better, way stronger. Like people are not ready for this Diddy Kong, and people weren't ready for it. You know what I mean? Like people, do you even see Tweek go for Z drop there anymore? No, because it's inconsistent. It's very telegraphed, right? So you can definitely tell like looking at certain strategies, and obviously Z drop there was like something we went into Summit and we're like, okay, this is gonna be very strong. And then as time goes on, it's like, oh fuck, people will kind of like scout this out. If I miss it, then like I'm off stage. I have double jump. I just Z dropped my banana, and like like so many different strategies change with adaptation with other coaches or other players kind of adapting to the strategy, adapting to the meta. So, but that's the fun part, right? This game's not even close to being figured out, and
True.
I think that's the coolest part about Smash. Yeah, I think that's good. We definitely went a little over like an hour and a half today, but it was a really fun topic for sure. But if you guys,
Can I do final statements?
oh yeah, let's go around the horn. One around the horn.
There's one thing I want to say on the topic of ruthlessness and
Oh.
our top level players,
Soft serve.
and that is that. All right, a lot of the players that I see in any environment, but especially in Europe, I'm counting out Europe for this one. If you're a high or top level or whatever you want to call it, and your goal is to be the best, and you don't have a coach, you're trolling. That's it. That's all I want to say.
That's fair. Because it's just like it's just another outside resource that could give you another
Very, very
perspective,
good resource.
and it will not get you worse. There's no way it gets you worse. Having another
The only-
perspective will like at worst, there's no way you get worse or stay the same level. Because
Yeah.
giving you another perspective will always improve your gameplay, no matter what. In my opinion.
The only negative is that it hurts your ego because now you're not like doing it on your own. You have to credit someone else. Oh no! But that's what I see from a lot of players. Like I can figure it out on my own. Like X did it on their own, and then you figure out that X, whoever it is, probably had like a lot of friends help them. Maybe even a coach that you haven't heard about, etc. Like Leo has last, but he also had a coach that helped Meister as well. I think
Nuts.
they
Yeah,
they helped him
Yeah.
out as well. Probably has a lot of people who are just like helping him out with matchups, etc., etc.
Hobby. Yeah.
Like, yeah, exactly. So the more you do stuff on your own, like that is not cool. It is not admirable. It's just dumb. That is just dumb. If you're trying to be the best, use all the resources that you can, including on today's topic, picking a better character or picking a character that gets you more success in the meta. So yeah, what I would like to see is more ruthlessness, and that doesn't mean like I don't need everyone to play Steve or whatever. What I do want people to do is to look at this as like, okay, I'm trying to get to a goal. What are my resources to get there? How can I get there as efficiently as possible? And then ask yourself, okay, so well, when I don't want to use a tool, why is that? Right? So when Void decides to not camp out Sonic, why is that? And then it might be, well, I don't find it enjoyable. I don't find it fun. That's not how I want to play. That's fine. But then like there's the caveat again, right? I want to be the best, but to do an actual final statement on today's topic in terms of like picking a character in secondaries, I think people overestimate how motivating playing a fun character is. I think a lot of the competitive players, and I assume that the watcher is or the viewers, whatever, is going to be competitive minded. A lot of competitive players get the most satisfaction from problem solving, the satisfaction from winning, and the satisfaction from self improvements. And all of that is way easier, way more attainable with a character that fits your goals. So enjoyment, while it is good for like the short-term motivation, it's it's not a long-term sustainable source of energy. So think about that when picking your character. Think about that when considering a secondary or a dual main, etc. But more than anything, like I'm not trying to tell, I'm not telling you to pick a good character. I'm not telling you to pick a fun character. I'm telling you to pick a character that fits your goal. And I'm telling you when you're improving, use resources that also fit that goal. And the more you do that, the better. Like I'm a coach, I asked help from Tony, right? Even though like I can look at my own thoughts, I can analyze. I feel like I'm one of the best analysts in the Smash scene. I'm still asking for a second perspective. And like Tony said, and no shade to you, Tony, you helped me a lot, but like there are things that he said that didn't help me. What did I get out of that? I tested it out. I got new information. And even though they weren't like quote unquote good things, they helped me on the long run because now I understand things more. I've tested new perspective. I've become a better player because he was wrong in rare situations. So even when you get a coach that doesn't help you, if it's like new perspectives, new information, that is still helping you, right? So any little bit, any extra perspective, like Charles said, just super useful. So that was a bit of a rant. I'm sorry, but I think for Europe, it's a little bit of an emotionally charged topic for me because I see so many people with potential that are just not living up to it because of ego, pride, etc., etc. And I think every single one of those players could do well to just like turn down the ego and turn up the ruthlessness. All right,
And
cool.
you can catch Ramses on Metafy at
No, that's
metafy.gg/Ramses.
it's not an ad for my coaching. You guys can go to Tony or me or Charles. It doesn't matter to me. Just like what I'm trying to see is a better region, right? Like I'm good. I'm fully booked. I've been fully booked since the start of this year. I don't need the extra European customers. It would be cool to see you guys, but I don't need you guys. I just want you guys to find help. Not
He
because
said, "Kick rocks."
no. You guys are making it so fucking hard on me, dude. I'm trying to be
Kidding.
balanced.
I know it's out of love, and yeah, you want to see people just
Succeed.
get better and succeed and win, and just like I said, it's also a discovery of yourself, right? And it goes a long way. And yes, I think to me, I want to see people have more coaches. And there's a slew of reasons. Obviously, it comes from the individual getting better, you learning more about yourself in terms of competition. Because trust me, there's a lot of people I see. Like, just to put in context for me, like I grew up in competition. I had some scholarships for football. For American football. And when it came to like sports, like in sprinting and stuff too, I was practicing, potentially at like a level where I could actually train for the Olympics, like my times were like good enough to be in that kind of tier. And so I had a lot of friends who ended up going that route, right? And pursuing that. So there's a lot of people out there that this is kind of their first foray into the big sense of competition. This is where they're learning, discovering themselves and stuff too. You got to knock down the ego. I'm telling you right now, right? And it's a blessing because of my job, like on the Rebel side, I'm able to like connect with and hear from some of these like just top tier, like creme de la creme freaking people. You're literally Olympic, like some of the best athletes in the freaking world. And they say it all the time. If you are trying to be the best in your world, you are literally an idiot if you think you can do it alone. You need to have people with you. And that goes for anything in life. It doesn't have to be on the sportive side, right? You have to do it with others, right? Your mind alone is not greater than the culmination of the world. It's just not. If you think it is, get your brain checked. That's not real life, right? And it is a beautiful thing to share these experiences with others as well, right? It's a beautiful thing to sit down and be able to talk and break down a game and learn about yourself and rediscover these things about yourself in order to become a better player with people who genuinely care and want to see you succeed, right? That is an engaging process. It is a process of labor and it's a process of love. So like it's something that you should look at. Don't feel detracted. Don't feel like you're taking a cheap way out or something stupid, right? This is not for us to be like, hey, yeah, hire us, blah, blah, blah. Like, no, right? We're all making it in the ways that we're making it. We're all right. But the best thing for us is we want to share this passion. We want to share this love and this sense of discovery. That's why we're here. That's why we do what we all do, because we love it. And we love to see everyone share in that. And everyone watching can share in it as well. So please take that stuff into consideration. Continue to learn, continue to grow, humble yourself so you can get to the next level, right? So you can be the best version of yourself as possible. And know that no matter where you are in the world, no matter what aspect or avenue you're looking at in life, it cannot be done alone, right? Life is a shared experience. and you need all the other pieces, right? You're only one piece of Exodia at best. Okay,
At best.
you can't do it alone. At
You are
best.
a piece of
All right?
Exodia, but you are.
Yeah.
You have the
Yeah.
potential.
Yeah, exactly. Talk to him, man. Let him know. You
Get
are.
it.
You have the potential, man. We got to get all the pieces together, man. All right.
Exactly.
So
Yo, but
that's
I'm
all
the
I got
head
to say.
though.
That's my rant.
What up?
All right. I bet, Chuck. All right, Team Rocket.
Yo, I'm
Team Rocket, dude.
We're blasting off again, man.
There, I will tell you, as someone who is probably among the most experienced at top level assistants, I do not know of a single player's coaching situation in the top 10, top 20 who don't have not just one but multiple people coaching them. Like it is considered fairly standard to have a team. Now you'll probably have players selling it as being solo, but I'm telling you right now, a lot of these people have at least two prominent coaches behind them. It's not a matter of, oh, this is just all they were. It's a matter of I don't think people understand how much work it is to be traveling to a new place on the planet every single week and have to figure out someone who's trying to figure you out in real time every single week, where there's 50 plus people who are gunning for you, who are at near or at your skill level, who are thinking and are very clever and really are hungry, and they haven't been traveling every week this month. They are only coming to the tournament to beat you, and you have to keep up with these people every single week. So, like, the sheer level of work, the sheer volume of effort and time that you need to put into this is absolutely mind-boggling. You have to put in hundreds of hours of training every single month while also traveling across the planet. And if you haven't practiced while traveling, let me assure you, it is an extreme challenge. So, just traveling by itself is a challenge when you're traveling that frequently. It takes a lot out of you. It's mentally difficult, physically difficult, emotionally difficult. You're missing a lot of your normal support networks that you might not have realized were there. Just there's all these things that are draining on you, and I would like to reiterate again: no one is ever playing at their true best at a major. Everyone is spending parts of themselves to be there, and so they're not 100% ever. No one has ever been 100% at a major before, and so you just have to collect as much of yourself as you can. And there is a team. It takes a village to raise a champion. So, and that's true in anything you do, anywhere you go. The best in the world is never someone who did it by themselves. The top 10 of anything you do in the planet. If there is a top 10, it's because there was only like a few hundred people trying to do it. It just doesn't happen. So, anytime you get in the more sub percentile range of population, the statistics are always going to skew towards how many people had that extra push. So the question is, do you want to do it alone or do you want to do it?
Yeah. All right. Well,
Yeah.
great pep talk there, and I mean, just really good perspectives all around. Honestly, though, it's this topic dives really deep. So, let us know what you guys feel in the comments. I mean, a lot of motivational stuff as well, and I mean, just character crises. I mean, we went over a ton of topics, so just let us know what your thoughts about it. Let us know if you think the Smash community is soft served or not, and we'll see you on the next one. Class dismissed.